Everybody, what's going on? This is Chris Flowers. I am the executive producer of the Biz Coach Show. I'm here with the one and only Eric T. Whitmoyer. He is the founder and CEO of My Biz Coaches. What is going on, sir?
I'm not much, actually. So except we're getting ready to do a really cool show. I'm excited about today's show.
Absolutely. We are, it's 2025, it's a new year. So we're getting new subscribers to the channel all the time and things like that. We're getting new listeners and stuff. So I kind of wanted to go over the backstory again of what My Biz Coaches is, and want to get people who are newer to the show, orientated into, what it is that you actually do. We run the Biz Coaches show, but like I said, as far as like the foundation is, My Biz Coaches. So I wanted to get into that a little bit more and get people familiarized with what it is that we're actually doing.
Absolutely. I'm excited to do it.
Yeah, let's get it on, man. So, let's start with the overview, like, what inspired you, to, start My Biz Coaches, and what's the whole, mission behind the company?
Yeah, great question. So when, so as you know, a little bit about my background, I spent 23 years in the wireless industry. I know I've shared that on the show before. And during those years, I helped a couple of companies grow to over 100 million in revenue. Mm-hmm. The last company, I was like one of the first employees, helped grow that company to 140 stores. We were doing 105 million at gross margin or gross profit. So I think our top line was about 180 million or something like that. But we sold that in 2017, and the company that acquired us kind of led me to believe they wanted me to hang around and be the VP of West Coast operations. And I was all excited about that. And then come to find out that wasn't exactly what they had planned for me.
Shocker.
So a couple of weeks into the acquisition, I found myself interviewing with another competing company for a similar role elsewhere. And I'm like, if they don't want me, I'll find somebody who does, right? So I went and interviewed. They found out I was interviewing and then turned around and let me go a few days later. So needless to say, the kicker is that part of the deal, it wasn't all bad for me, but part of the deal was it said that if they let us go, any of the executives within the first year of the deal, of the close of the sale, that they had to pay me out for my bonuses and commissions and salary for a year. So it wasn't all bad, but it did leave me in a situation where I couldn't do anything in the industry I'd been in for the last 20 some years.
Wow.
So I literally was like, okay, well, what do I do now? And so for about, over the last 30 years, I'd had 14 of my own businesses that I either started or acquired over those years. So had an ice cream distribution business, had a martial arts school, had a coffee shop, had a trucking business. I've done a number of these different businesses. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? So initially I started doing insurance, but I at that point I had done some training and got some certifications, decided I was going to be a life coach, or at least leading up to that transaction. I thought that was the path I was going to have. And then I remember I had a chance conversation with an individual. She used to own a company called Networking Phoenix, which is now called Network Live, and the owners of that are friends of mine. But the previous owner, as she was getting ready to leave, I was just starting. I had a conversation with her, trying to prepare myself to become a life coach. And she said to me, she goes, "Eric, I hear you saying all these things. You want to become a life coach." She goes, "Why do you want to be a life coach?" And it kind of caught me off guard. I was like, I don't know. I was like, I thought it would be cool. It's like, and I said, well, what I loved most about what I was doing the last 10 years of my career was I was helping people grow and develop, watching them aspire from, like an 18 to 20-year-old sales rep moving up to a store manager, moving into a director role, and, making a multi-six-figure income and buying houses, and watching them just literally grow up while I'm working with them. And it was really fulfilling, right? And then having them come to me and say, "Boss, I'm doing this. I'm here because of you." And I'm like, no. All I did was point you in the right direction. You're the one that did all the hard work. Don't give me all the credit. I said, you did what you did too. I just helped guide you. But I loved that path of guiding people through that, right? And so I really got a lot of what I would call one of my old mentors. It was the COO for that company, Express Locations, Darren Yeager, and he said I had to find a new jack. When you do sales, you get a high. A jack is a new high. Is your high?
Okay.
Your high. And in sales, your high is closing the deal, right? Or getting
right.
And when you move from salesperson to sales manager, and then from sales manager to different, you become an executive. you're so far removed from the sales process. That's not
right. Right.
Even though you have sales in your title, you're not selling anymore. Right. And so he said to me, he says, you have to learn, you have to get a new jack. You have to get a new high. And so my new high became developing these people. And I really, really thrived on it. And so anyway, I say all that to say that that's what I told her. That's what I explained to Gelly. I said, Gelly, that's why I want to become a life coach. And she goes, I hear you. And I hear the passion. She goes, but everything you say is numbers and analytics and this could be better because of this. And she goes, I really see you more as a business coach. Now, mind you, that was in like 2015, 2016.
Yeah. When there's no such thing as a business coach hardly, right? Yeah.
But I just not in the same realm, right? It was anyway. It was kind of interesting because it took me a couple of years to hear that. But when I first started out and I was trying to do the life coaching thing, I had a client reach out, hired me as a life coach, and then went on to start talking about business coaching. And finally, during the initial conversation, I'm like, look, I'd love to help you, but it sounds like more of your problems are business coaching. And quite honestly, business coaching is a different rate than life coaching.
Yeah, right.
if you want to get your partner involved, we can have the conversation and we can see how I can help you in the business. So needless to say, that's how I got my first gig. And their sales were down. They'd been down for a while. And they're like, we really want to grow the business and take it back to where it was. It used to be like $4 million and we're like $1 million plus. And they're like, we want to turn things around. And I sat down and analyzed their business. And I did what my plan was at that time to analyze. And all I was going to focus on was driving sales. Mm-hmm. And so as I started going through it, I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to help you increase sales. I guarantee a 20% lift in the next 6 months. And with everything that I'd analyzed as I went through assessment with them, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to increase sales by 20% in the next 6 months. 5 months in, sales are up 28%. Everybody's high five and they're loving it. They're ecstatic, $250,000 increase in sales. And, the trend is there and they're all excited. And all of a sudden COVID hits.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, oh, poop.
Right.
And they're like, hey, so we need to talk. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So I'm expecting them to take me to and by the way, this is a prove it deal. Like I took hardly any money up front. It was all based on performance. So I was going to get a percentage of the sales that I generated for them. And so now, like all that's out the window at this point. I'm like, oh, this isn't, and I'm thinking they're going to, give me some money, kick me to the curb. And they said to me, yeah, hey, what do you think we should do? And I'm like, what do you mean? Because I'm expecting them to basically say, and I'm like,
yeah, hit the brakes.
Yeah. So I'm like, well, here's what I do know. This is something I learned years ago. And I said, I know that the average small business is about 60 days from complete insolvency, meaning they can't go 60 days without revenue. Many of them can't even go a month, let alone 60 days, but they will be insolvent. They'll have to shut down the business. And I said, at this point, we're like 3, maybe 4 weeks into COVID. Nobody knows what's going on. We haven't even had that. Like if you remember here in Phoenix, we opened up again in like May or something, like the end of May or something like that.
Remember that?
And we weren't even there yet. I mean, this is still like maybe early April. And they're like, we don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, here's what I know. And if I'm you, because they were sitting on some cash. And I said, if I'm you, I take advantage of the PPP, the EIDL loan, the ERC tax credits. I'd suck up that money. I get super lean. And I just ride it out. And they're like, okay, we're going to do that. And so then the next question is like, well, how do we do that? I'm like, you have a bookkeeper and accountant. They should be able to. And if you remember, the banks weren't helping the small business owners back then, right? They were going, initially the PPP money was going right to the big companies. The small businesses weren't getting anything, right? Unless you knew where to go. And so I said,
when I was at National Bank of Arizona, those guys and Horizon Community Bank, no, we were helping the small businesses.
Well, because you were the small banks, right?
Yeah, correct. Banks, but Chase and all that, no, they weren't even feeling it. They were just kicking people out. Yeah, exactly.
Yep. And so that one of the banks,
we were getting all their rejects. Everybody at Chase shut down. We just took all their deposits.
That's exactly what I told my clients to do, because they had 2 banks. They had Chase and another one. And I said, let's go to this smaller bank because I'm hearing that we're going to get better results. We go there. So we go there and they get funded within a handful of days. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, so they get their first check. And I want to say it was like $40,000 or something like that. Then they got their second bite of it a handful of months later. Then we did the EIDL loan. They got $150,000, like $150,000 loan over 30 years at 1%. I mean, that's like a no-brainer deal. Just take the money and sit on it. Worst case scenario, especially with everything going on, right? And your monthly payments are going to be $750. You're doing $1 million in year revenue. You're not going to notice $750 a month, right? So anyway, they get that, they ride it out, and literally within like 3 months from that time frame, three months, maybe 4, we started getting letters from vendors and from competitors. We're going out of business. We're not going to open again. We can't continue to do business. Blah 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 blah. Remember, these are they operate all over the United States, even though they're based here in Phoenix. And so and so everything that I said played out, right? And a number of competitors went by the wayside. And some took a little longer than others, but a lot of them were gone pretty quickly. And so it opened the door to kind of maintain that. So I held that relationship with them for the next 5 years. So awesome. In addition to that, they referred me out to other clients. And so what ended up happening is I'm doing PPP and idle loan deals. And I'm like, they kept saying, hey, you got somebody else. We got somebody else. And I'm like, so I started bringing in other people to help me. And all of a sudden I look around and everybody's doing stuff on Zoom. And I'm like, oh, I don't need to be in their business. I can just, help these people online. I'm like, I can scale this thing. And so that's when I changed the name to My Biz Coaches, because originally we're Superior Consulting Solutions. And I was only going to focus on sales. And all of a sudden, going through that process, helping all those people with PPP and all that kind of, most of these people had never even looked at a 941, let alone knew what the hell it was. Right? They didn't even know what the document was, and that was the primary document you needed for the payroll submission, right? To get the
right.
PPP. And I'm like, how do you not know this stuff about your business? I mean, like, I don't even practice. I did accounting in college like 25 years ago. I don't remember half this stuff that I'm supposed to remember, but I know this, right? And so what I uncovered in that first year and a half of doing this business is a lot of business owners that are out there. They're probably pretty good at what they do. They just struggle with a lot of the other stuff, other parts of the business.
Correct.
And finance was by far and away one of the ones that was a big missed opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I saw the opportunity to really kind of expand on that, and we continued to grow, and it's become what it is today.
I think that was the thing that, you and I met through H7 or like that. And, when I first met you, of course, like I said, we share, we're Army veterans and things like that. But I think what I appreciate about you is like, you walk the walk. It wasn't like you got out of college and like, okay, I know numbers, or but you took these companies and you grew them. And then you sold them, and then, and even, they said your trucking company wasn't as successful, things like that. So you've been down the rough roads, you've been down the high roads and everything in between. So I think that's what kind of, say, hey, I got to work with this guy, because just your approach and, you said your actual on the ground, boots on the ground expertise, I think drove it home for me. And I'm sure probably a lot of other people as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot to be said about that, Chris, as it relates to people in the business coaching space. There's a lot of people out there that position themselves as business coaches, and they talk about mindset. And I'm not gonna discredit that, because there's a lot about the mindset side of running an effective business. But if you don't have the basic blocking and tackling strategies for marketing and sales and managing your finances and all that kind of stuff, if you don't know that or haven't done that, I don't know how you could truly be a real business coach per se. And help people improve their businesses. You may be able to help them improve the mindset, but that's not going to fix the broken pieces in the business if they don't understand it. So, and I appreciate that, because I think there's a lot to be said about actually having your own business and then being a business coach. Even if you had some setbacks in a business, hell, that's what you learn. That's how you learn. You don't learn from successes, you learn from failures.
Well, I think that's what it was. I think because you had obviously great success, but you've also had the failures too. Because a lot of people say, okay, they had success, we can reproduce that thing. And a lot of times that happens. But what do you do when the chips are down? How do you navigate that? So I think that's what it was that brought me on board. And, me working with you, not only as a client, but now grew me as a coach as well. So, because your process is, it's real world, it's real time. So that's what I appreciate about it.
Yeah.
And I think, I had a question for you, what makes you unique? I think that's what really makes you unique. And it's not, you just did it once, you've done it over and over and over again. You know what I mean? So I think that, and then even some fields like, when you started ice cream distributing, that was more almost by accident, and you turned that around and made that successful, like just because, like, wait a minute, we could do this so much better. You know?
Right.
You know, but that's a story I said, you know, probably for another time, things like that. You know, you mentioned, you know, your $1 billion mission. Can you explain, you know, what that is and, you know, why it's, you know, an important goal for your company to have?
Yeah. So I'm going to give a little bit of kudos, not too much, because you know how I am about giving out kudos, but I'm going to give a little bit of kudos to my buddy, Joe Smith. That really is his name, Joe Smith. No.
John
But
Doe.
Joe was one of my early coaches. He was partnering up with me. We actually have an episode of recorded. We did our first podcast together, but we were talking about, and I was really convinced that I'm like, I can't do anything small. My personality is wired in a way that if I'm going to do it, I got to do it big. And sometimes that means it goes slower than I want it to, and sometimes it's a little messier than I'd like it to be. But if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it big. And so when I started understanding the plight of the small business owner and the challenges that they struggle through, I'm like, I know I can help. Not only can I help, but I can help a lot of people if I can get them to hear me. And so I'm like, but we need to get behind, and we need something behind us. And one thing I learned from the business owners of Express Locations was, and that was the last wireless entity that I worked for, the one we sold in 2017. What I learned from them very specifically, you know, is the power of a company culture, how impactful that can truly be. I had heard company culture. I was familiar with the concept, but it really resonated with me with that organization, because we had a really, really deeply entrenched company culture, and people really bought into who we were and what we did. And I'm like, if I'm going to build something comparable, if I'm going to build anything close to what we were able to do there, it's got to have the right culture. And for have the right culture, you have to have a good mission. And so I was really hooked on, okay, if we're going to do this podcast, we need to have a mission that we can share with people. But it, you know, yeah, I want to make a lot of money. Yeah, I want to build a big business. I want to help a lot of business owners. But who am I helping? How am I going to do that? And what does that look like? And so I came up with this $1 billion mission. And the $1 billion mission, you back into the math, and I'm a very analytical person. So if you know that about me, you get it. But
yeah, exactly.
I figured if we could help 100 coaches, well, first of all, it was 1,000 clients. That's originally where it started. If you had 1,000 clients and they each did $1 million in top line revenue, then that would be $1 billion. Sorry. So 1,000 clients at $1 million in top line revenue profitably, right? Because top line revenue doesn't mean anything, they aren't profits. But if you profitably doing $1 million a year at 1,000 businesses, that would get you your $1 billion mission. And then I backed into it one step further later on when I identified, well, if I had 100 coaches and each of them had 10 clients, that's how we could achieve that mission. Because I couldn't work with 1,000 clients and have that impact in 1,000 different clients.
No, nobody can. Right. That's crazy.
Yeah. And so I'm like, I need a mission bigger than me to really be excited. And you know, honestly, if you're going to do something that big, you're going to have some really good people around you. So as I find other people that are equally passionate about helping business owners, so people like yourself, right? You know, I know how passionate you are and what you do with the show and the people you're trying to help and how you're helping them, that you have that passion as well. And so I'm looking for more people like that to get to this mission, because I can't do it by myself, right? Something that big, we need a lot of help. And so that's what it comes down to. But so that's how I came into the $1 billion mission. And really it's the reason a lot of people would ask, you know, why $1 million? And I'm like, that's a great question. Let me shed some light on this for you. So you take $1 million, an average business will operate at about a 15, maybe a 20% profit margin. Some might be better, but I mean, you're talking about like a single digit percentage.
Exceptional. Yeah.
Exceptional. More than 20%, right? So the vast majority of them are going to be 15. Actually, the larger percentage are going to be less than 15% net margin. But if you targeted 15 to 20%, that means for $1 million in top line revenue, you're going to make $150,000 to $200,000. That's not bad, right? That's a decent. That's actually what I would consider a livable wage for investing as many hours as you're going to invest as a small business owner, for as many years as it's going to take to build it to that, and the amount of energy and effort you're going to have to put it to get it to that point, right? Not to mention your own dollars that you're going to invest. And quite honestly, even at $150,000, between a livable wage and actually get your return on the investment, you're never going to get the time back. I mean, if you're that passionate about building a business, whether it's a franchise or you acquire a business or you start it from scratch, it doesn't matter. You're going to put the time and energy in to build something meaningful like that and get to $1 million. I guarantee you're going to lead a lot of blood, sweat, and tears on the playing floor. And when you do that, right, to actually get the return, you're going to have to do this for 10, 15, maybe 20 years to really fully see the value from the return, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you'd have to do it at least at 15 to 20% to make it worth your while, in my eyes. Now, some people, hey, I'm happy with 50 grand a year. I'm like, well, that's not even today with inflation 5 years removed from when I started this business. I don't even know. You couldn't even make a living on 50 grand a year anymore at this point. So it's, it's got to be somewhere in that realm. And so that's why $1 million. And here's the other thing. Only less than 10%. It ranges anywhere from as little as 5, as much as 9. It's never exceeded 10%. It's always been less than 10% in the last 40 years of the number of businesses that actually reach $1 million.
Wow.
For 40 years now, less than 10% of all businesses, there's 32 to 33 million businesses in the United States. Less than 10% will reach $1 million in revenue.
That's right. We went over that in the coaching session that we had with the Titans there. So we covered that session. Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, when you think about it from that perspective and you realize that only 1 in 10 are going to reach that threshold, that really makes the $1 billion mission super powerful at that point. Because if I could impact, if the team that we put together can impact 1,000 business owners to reach that, how much more of an impact are we creating?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Everything is going to do for the economies that we're in, creating all those jobs and like that. It's going to be fantastic. Absolutely. That's a mission I know I can get behind. I know there's probably a lot of other people out there that have similar expertise. I have a commercial lending background. You're kind of transforming me more into looking at the broader picture, not just the finance portion, but everything else with the marketing and everything like that. And like I said, I know you've transformed a lot of the way that I think and the way I go about doing business and things like that now. So like I said, definitely appreciate that. Now we're talking $1 million businesses. We're talking about $1 billion company, things like that. But you actually help people from startup status all the way to exit. So can you break that down? The phases of growth, how My Biz Coaches supports and how we approach one another on that.
Yeah. So a good question. So what's interesting is when I first started, everybody told me focus on companies that are already doing $1 million. And because when you first get started in any kind of coaching business, particularly any kind of high ticket transaction, you want to this from finance side, right? Yeah. There's certain businesses you don't want to go after the business only doing $300,000 a year because the loan that they're looking for is like 25 grand. You make a few bucks on that. But you get somebody who asks for a $500,000 loan, right? Now that's you're getting a decent sized check out of that. Right. You do fewer clients to get that, right? So logically that makes sense. The problem is and don't ever tell anybody this, but I have a big heart and I try and help everybody that I can.
What? I'm sorry. Wait, my headphones.
Yeah. Don't ever admit that to anybody ever, period. But I can't say no. And so it was killing me that I'm looking for $1 million businesses and I keep seeing all these people struggling. And I'm like, now, how many of them actually take me up on the help that I can provide them? I mean, half the people I put out proposals and they're like, yeah, we're going to go in a different direction or we're not ready for it. We can't afford it. I'm like, you could afford it if you would just let me come in and help you. Right. I mean, right. And it sounds obnoxious for me to say is like, but I know the impact I can have on a business if you just, it's literally, there's times where I feel like I'm like, just get out of my way and let me do it for you.
Let me chime in on that. I know the impact that he can have on your business. So let me back that statement up. That's not you saying, and that's me saying it.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean it's super frustrating, but the truth of the matter is and so what's ironic is one of our clients, ABA Advantage, Lacey and Suhani, right? So they were referred to me by somebody who was helping them get some business credit, build their business credit. And they're like, they need a coach. And I think you'd be a good fit for them. So I met with them. There was a lot of pieces that I felt like I could help them with. And they were a startup. They had some access to credit and things like that. And I'm like, the reason I would stay away from a startup initially when I first started, because they don't have the money to pay. Mm-hmm. Like I got to make a living too, right? And so, right. Like, as a coach from one side of this, as a coach, I'm like, I got to make a living. But as somebody who knows that they can help these people. And like, I can help guide you if you'll follow. And I'm so glad that I did, because they're probably one of my most astute clients. They listen, they do the things I tell them to do. You know, they have their challenges like any other business, but they work through it and they muscle through it. And they're really good, for lack of a better term, they're good students. Yeah. And they apply themselves and they do the hard stuff, and it's not always easy. And we've had a lot of, maybe when I probably don't want to put them out there, but I probably had a couple of ugly cry sessions, right? Yeah. But the truth of the matter is that's what business is, right? Sometimes you just have those tough situations and those hard conversations. My point is that I probably would never have done a startup if it wasn't for them. And now I'm like, we do startups to exits. Mm-hmm. I'm willing to help anybody. Exit strategy, we can help them. If we spent a lot of time, I spent a lot of time with a gentleman by the name of Walt Lipsky, who was he was the president of the Arizona Business Brokers Association for like 10, 12 years, something like that. Mm-hmm. And he's been a broker for 38, 40 years, I think now. Might even be retired. But when I first started in the business, like year 2, 3, I was introduced to him by one of my coaches, and Jim introduced me to him. And I asked him, the very first thing I asked him, you got to get this, Chris. I said to him, I heard, Walt, that 80% of businesses that list to sell never sell. And he said to me verbatim, I don't know if it's 70 or if it's 90, but it's definitely in that threshold. And I said, so if I went around and said 3/4 of businesses that list never sell, I'd be relatively accurate. He goes, depending on the timing or the area of the United States, he goes, I'd say that's pretty much right across the board.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that just blew me away, because I'm like, that can't be true. Right. And he's like, no, not only is it true, but that also doesn't account for the people that just shut down that never list.
Right. On top of that.
Yeah. And I was like, well, how can that be? And he went on to tell me, he gave me 4 specific reasons why most businesses don't sell. And so that became a guiding light principle, really, that we began to illustrate in our coaching and help people identify. Don't do these 4 things, or do these 4 things this way or else, because you're going down that path.
I've seen it a million times in, finance. Somebody say, okay, hey, I'm looking to buy this business, things like that. Okay, well, let me get the tax returns, let me get the debt schedule, things like that. They're like, yeah, they're asking $5-10 million in business. Business is worth like 1.5, bro. We're done doing it at the end, because like I said, because they depreciated every asset, they took all the owner's draws, they did that. It's all legal, it's all great, whatever. But if you want the, and I've had this on my show, I've gone over this on my show. If you want the bag at the end, you got to be willing to show something on that balance sheet, which means you're going to be paying, you're going to write a check every quarter. But if you want the bag at the end and you want to, sail off into the sunset, it's either pay me now or pay me later. But a lot of owners don't want to hear that. Right. And and if they don't have the right business coach, if you're there and you're going over their goals, because I know one of the questions that you asked, like, okay, what is it you're trying to accomplish? And when you say, hey, when is it you're looking to exit? Well, we want to exit in 5 years. Okay, here's what it's going to take to do that. And if they're not willing to listen to that, because like I said, a lot of people they don't understand the value that you bring, to that table. They're like, oh yeah, my business is doing blah, 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 blah. But like I said, they're doing their tax, they're doing all the things that are legal, but they're short selling themselves. And as far as the finance guy, me being the finance guy, I'm not paying a nickel over. Hey, if I see black and white, do the business evaluation, cash flow. I'm like, this business is worth 1.5. Sorry about your luck.
Yeah,
you did that. Congratulations. And we're not overpaying. So
and that's to your point. That's absolutely. And here's the thing: there's no freaking directions on how to run a business.
Right.
Like you sit down to play Monopoly, and there's a list of directions on how to play the game. Right. There's the rules and all that kind of stuff. There's no freaking rules on how to run a business. There's no directions on what to do step by step. It's just a hodgepodge of shit that you just got to figure it out. Right. And the truth of the matter, it's super frustrating, because I'm like I remember that first client that I referenced, we had a number of conversations that are like, well, what are we supposed to do? I'm like, no, you don't understand. There's no supposed to. It's what makes sense. Like there's no set rules on how to do this. You just need to look at what you have and then identify what's working and then do more of that. And if something's not working, you strip that out and don't do that anymore. Mm-hmm. That's what you're supposed to do, right? And it's really hard for people who are used to, especially if you've come from an employee mentality. If you come from an employee mentality and go into business, man, that you are going to struggle immensely if you don't get some guidance, if you don't get a mentor.
But what is it we went over in the coaching session the other day? You got to know the direction you're going in. You got to know what your goal is. Okay. If you don't have your goal set down, right, you're not going to know how to navigate that. That's one of the things that you cover. From my experience, working with you, and because so if I don't have that, end goal in mind, everybody's, because again, as a business owner, you're in the day-to-day grind, you're doing this, you're doing that, things get up and running, the cash starts flowing. Okay. Hey, I'm going to go buy myself a new truck. I'm going to go do this. But it's like, but it is everything that I think, like I said, I think I appreciate this, what you did. Maybe I'm, going off on a tangent, but it's like, I have to keep that goal, that end goal in mind on my day-to-day operations, even though I may not, end it for the next 15 years. If I'm not striving towards that goal every day and keeping in line with what's going to get me there, I start going off track. And this is where you kind of bring me back in line. Whoa, hey, partner, we're going sideways here. Bring me back. Right. So I really appreciate that. But a lot of people, they don't, like I said, there's like, and then it's 20 years down the road, they're like, okay, I want to sell the company. Yeah. You didn't have a plan, brother. Sorry about your luck.
Well, you'll be able to sell it, but you're going to get a fraction of what you should have got for it.
Exactly. Yeah. Precisely. Yep. So I agree.
Great point. And so anyway, that whole startup to exit, I mean, we have a whole series of, matter of fact, we're the final edits of the website will be posted here in the next, probably, I'm going to say worst case scenario, middle of February, but what it is, it literally breaks it down, and it has, okay, if you're a micro business, you're 0 to 100K. Mm-hmm. If you're 100K to 250, you're what I categorize as a startup. If you're in, so first 0 to 100 is what we call micro or a side hustle, right? Because you're not making a livable wage if you got expenses in that business, right? If you do 100 to 250, what I would call or categorize as a startup, and then you have your growth phase from 250 to 500. You get into the 500 range, you're starting to get a meaningful business. Like you can actually pull out a really good salary for yourself, depending on what your margins are like and if you're pricing
employees and everything like that. Yep.
Right, yeah. And then you go from growth phase into scale phase. So 500 to 1 million is your scale, right? And then you're like, then you get to the next level, and then you have the what I call scale phase 2, which is you go from 1 million to 3 million. Mm-hmm. The next category is from 3 million to 10 million, and then you got 10 to 25, 25 to 50, 50 to 100. And in each one of those, the 6 core principles that we talk, or 6 core competencies, that we talk about, they're the same core competencies that you have to have in your business, and we'll talk about that one of these other questions. But in those 6 core competencies, they're what you have to do is different at each phase. So when you go from micro business to startup, from that 0 to 100 to 100 to 250, they're very similar, because it's all about just getting more sales in the door and improving your ability to convert your business and all that kind of stuff. You start going from 250 to 500, you need to track that data. You need to have good financials in place. You need to be looking at building business credit and things like that. And you need to have it before you get there, not wait until you get there. I mean, how many times have you seen people and I think we're jumping into the next question, but I know a piece of finances is identifying you need the money, when you need the money, when you're going to need the money, not wait until you need the money, because if you wait till you need the money, then you're screwed.
Absolutely. I was going to say that was going to be a great segue into the next question. So, financial clarity, that's, I think that's a big challenge for a lot of business owners. And, so why don't you go over how you kind of help them understand the financials and help them navigate that?
Yeah. And I this varies from business to business. And honestly, if I engage with every client the exact same way it should be.
You can't. Yeah, every deal's a snowflake. Every deal's a snowflake. That's Even right. It's the same industry, it's still a snowflake, because you have different individuals running it and different priorities and different goals and different everything like that.
Exactly. You got it. And so the challenge that you run into is that you should really do a financial analysis of every business. And,
absolutely.
And if I stood my ground, what I would do is I'd literally give them, finance 101. And that would literally be the first 30 days. I'd go through a finance 101. And I'm qualified to have that conversation because it's business owner finance 101. It's not accounting 101. It is, and it's somebody who's got, 30 years of sales experience on top of it, right? So it's like drive sales, make sure the sales are profitable, right? Make sure you're not losing money on the sale. Because I literally had a conversation with somebody the other day, and they uncovered for the first time in 3 years, they've been selling a solution, a service of all things, that they actually lose money on when they sell it and didn't know it. And they've been doing it for 3 years and can't figure out why they went from making $250,000 a year to losing $100,000 a year.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm like, the only way that happens is you're not looking at your numbers.
No, dude. Right? You should know what your gross profit margin is on.
Exactly. And or you don't know your numbers, right? You're either not looking at them or don't know them, one of the two. But when you build up a decent little nest egg, you got money in the bank, you're like, I got money in the bank, I can pay the bills. And unfortunately, we both had Amira on our shows. Mm-hmm. Yep. That was what she said. She said most of her clients say, I got money in the bank, I can pay the bills, I'm not worried about it. I'm like, no. Right. Anyway, so we help them identify what are the key things on a P&L that you need to understand, Mr. and Mrs. Business Owner, so you can make sure that you understand whether or not your business is growing or being hurt in some way, right? You're going backwards. So a basic, finance 101. As a matter of fact, we have an electronic course. I don't know how much time you spend on the back end of our platform, but in our digital platform, we have those 300 plus hours of video content. Yeah. There's an entire financial course for business owners in there. And it literally walks through P&L 101 for people who don't understand it. And literally we give that solution away for free, just so that there's more people educated on it. I probably don't do enough of a good job of educating people that it's available.
That wasn't special for just me? I thought I was special. No. Really? Wow, dude.
Sorry, bro.
Wow.
Sorry, bro.
Wow, bro. Wow. Yeah, I thought because we were in the same army unit. I thought they thought you hooking a brother up, but no, it's free for everybody. Okay, all right. Well, thanks, man. Appreciate that. All right, cool. Burst my bubble. That's all right.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they don't all get to be on my show, though.
That's true. True. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. You brought me back. You were.
There you go. There you
go. And you talked about your sales background, and then of course we go over marketing quite a bit. In case you guys haven't figured out, Eric is my business coach. So in case you haven't figured that out yet. But so we go over, sales and marketing. I mean, that's what drives the revenue in the door. So how does, My Biz Coaches help businesses generate more leads and increase their sales?
Yeah. So, and I think it's really important to identify that sales and marketing are two different, even marketing and advertising are two different things. But to keep it to the question, from a marketing perspective, it's like helping you identify qualified leads, right? There's leads and then there's qualified leads. A lead is somebody to talk to about your service. A qualified lead is somebody who's identified that they're interested in your service. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean they're going to pay, but they have identified they're interested in what you're selling. And so, on the marketing side of the business, how do we get in front of more people to help them self-identify that they're a qualified lead? Mm-hmm. Right? That's from a marketing perspective, that's the key thing. So we do that through education, right? Explaining to people what your business does. As one of the things that I'm really adamant about when we do the marketing sessions is, use video, leverage different ways to help explain what you do and how what you do is different than what other people do. Mm-hmm. We talk extensively about market dominating position. How do I set myself apart from other people who do the same thing, at least from a categorical perspective, right? Tons of real estate agents, tons of financial people out there. How do you do it different, right? Mm-hmm. And then once we identify that we're talking to qualified leads, then we have to talk about a sales process. So, you referenced my background experience in sales, probably 30 years in sales and sales management. I will say this, I was probably never the best salesperson in any organization I was in, but I was always consistently in the top 10, at least the top 20, even in my worst months, because I had a duplicatable process that I could do month in and month out, would generate and put me in front of the right number of people that I needed to talk to hit the sales numbers I needed to hit to make the money I needed to make. right? And that didn't change from when I was a sales rep to when I became a sales manager. I coached and promoted the same thing over and over and over. And that continued to evolve even as an executive, right? My entire organization understood, I believe this is a process. Yes, there's some people that are gifted as salespeople, but there's still a very specific process. And once you identify that process and you go through the same steps each time, you'll get predictable results. It's the same with marketing and sales. If you once you understand what you need to have and you put all the pieces in place and run them in order, it's a sequence that happens every time. The beauty of all of that is once you identify all of that, then you know, okay, I need to talk to 100 people a month. I know that my closing ratio is 30%, so I'll close 30% of those people. And to get to talk to 100 people, I probably got to go to 1 in 10. So I need to put my information in front of 1,000 people, to talk to 100 people, to close 30 people at an average of $500. I make 15 grand. Right. And for me, that's super. And like, I'm again, super analytical. I get it. I'm probably the exception in that regard, but when you look at it that way, it's not so hard. Now I just need to identify how to solve for those numbers. And to me, it's like basic algebra, the way I look at it. But when it comes down to sales, there's a lot to be said about following a consistent process. I give you the information. I show you what we do. I identify the key things that are going to resonate with you. And I make sure that in those key things, what are the things that, again, separate me and make me, put me in a better position to provide service solution to you. And more importantly, how can I help you do whatever it is that you're trying to do? Right. And so we have that and we walk through that with every client. We help identify, okay, what's your marketing strategy and what's your sales process? And we make sure we identify what's right for you. Because then we can help increase your sales. Like if you're not closing at 30%, you're not talking to the right people. You're either not talking to the right people or your sales process is broken. If you close at 40-50%, then you have a really, really good sales process or you're not talking to enough people. You're only closing the easy ones or something like that, right? So you gotta
low-hanging fruit, yeah.
You gotta know what those numbers are, and you have to track all of that, which is the other piece that's really important.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot in this particular episode. Okay, so I think, so we're going to kind of end it there for this part, but you're going to have to come back for part 2 because Eric's just starting to drop the knowledge, because now we're going to start talking about technology. Now we're going to start talking about business credit, finance, things like that. And we're going to talk about different tools that you can use, CRMs and things like that. So you're going to have to come back for the next episode because, like I said, Eric Whitmore, the Biz Coach Show, My Biz Coaches, he's dropping knowledge all over the place. So you're going to have to come back for stage 2, man.
Appreciate it, Chris.
All right, man. We'll talk to you next time.
Thanks a lot.